Shabbat Shalom. The story is told of two old friends, Menachem and Mendel. They've been friends for nearly a century. And in that near century of friendship, the glue that's kept the two of them together has been a love of baseball. Playing baseball, watching baseball, thinking about baseball, talking about baseball. And Menachem and Mendel have been friends for this near century, and it's been baseball that's been the glue to keep them together. So sure enough, Menachem, when he heard the call that Mendel was on his deathbed, Menachem raced over to see his friend Mendel. And as they were saying their goodbyes, Menachem said to Mendel, "Mendel, I know you're dying, but I have a favor to ask." Mendel looks at his friend Menachem, "You have a favor to ask of me? I'm here on my deathbed." Menachem says, "Mendel, when you die and you go to heaven, I need you to answer a question for me. Is there baseball in heaven? I need to know. I love baseball, so I want to know the answer to this question. Mendel, is there baseball in heaven?" And sure enough, Mendel passes away. And a few days later, Menachem is sitting by himself, and he hears a voice call out from above, "Menachem! Mendel, is that you? Menachem, I've got good news and I've got bad news. The good news is there is indeed baseball in heaven. The bad news is you're scheduled to pitch next Wednesday." I've been thinking a lot about friendship this week. You gave me the gift of being away last weekend. And I got to go to a friend with whom I grew up. I was at her bat mitzvah, and her youngest child was becoming bar mitzvah in Chicago. So I got to go be part of the bar mitzvah. I got to bless him on the bima, which was really amazing. And I got to see people that I've been friends with for 40 years. I know to me that sounds like a long time. To some of you, that's just, a drop in the bucket. But we've been friends nearly our whole lives, so to go and be able to participate in their bar and bat mitzvah ceremonies was a real blessing. And you look at these friends, and I think because of them and their friendship, I'm a better leader, I'm a better person. Because we know we have wonderful parents, and we have wonderful schools. But who really plays a huge part in helping to raise us? The friends, the people with whom we surround ourselves. Now, we're in a difficult world. And a question I've been asking myself over and over again, really I would tell you for the last 6 months, really since October 7th. Who are your people? Who are your people? Who are the people that you want to surround yourself with, and who are the people who are bringing themselves to you? What kind of community do you want to be a part of, and who are the people that you want in that community? And it's a hard question to ask. Who are your people? In our own world, sometimes we're thrust into communities. The schools we go to, the synagogues we belong. We know as residents of the state of Michigan, either you're a Wolverine or you're a Spartan. God forbid you're a Buckeye. I have the microphone, I can say it. We know in our world, too, that too often we're separated by the party for whom we vote for president. Are you a Democrat or are you a Republican? And we have a hard time speaking to each other once we've identified that party to which we belong. As we come to our Torah portion this week, to Parashat Tazria, we see an interesting juxtaposition really with last week's Torah portion, Parashat Shmini. And it really comes to represent, I think, in a lot of ways, the whole of Leviticus, because it starts to tell us who our people are. The beginning of Leviticus, it teaches us about korban, which is a beautiful Hebrew word that no one really knows how to translate. Too often we call it sacrifice. A korban is a sacrifice. And we know the book of Leviticus is all about sacrifices. But the root of the Hebrew word korban, too often mistranslated as sacrifice, is karov, that which brings us close. And in this sense, it actually has to do with that which brings us closer to God. And we come to see through the first part of the book of Leviticus all these different rituals, including kashrut, including observance of the holidays, all these different rituals that are supposed to bring us closer to God. And our rabbis help us to understand this part of Leviticus by saying you should surround yourself with people who are seeking to draw themselves closer to God. These are your people, God-fearing people, people who understand respect, who understand humility, people who recognize that they're not the final authority, but there is a higher power to which we respond, and therefore we have to behave a certain way. And we see that transition happen in this week's Torah portion, Parashat Tazria, that tells us once we can, through our rituals, establish that relationship with God, realize the humility that we ought to possess, it then reminds us that we're all created in God's image, and therefore we have a responsibility to others. Through our worship of God, we come to realize that we have a responsibility toward others. And that turn happens this week. As Eli beautifully taught us a few minutes ago, the central message of Parashat Tazria is watch the words that you use. Don't engage in slander. Don't engage in gossip. Avoid lashon hara. The words we choose matter. And we now begin this pivot toward what I would say is the climax of the book of Leviticus, the height of this book in which we're supposed to draw closer to God. Because the climax of this book is not about yet another ritual. It's not about yet another sacrifice. The climax of this book is V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. That's the peak of this book. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Once we've established ourselves as people who revere God, we can then turn to others. We can make ourselves better people, and thereby, as Leviticus comes to remind us, surround ourselves with people who understand this obligation. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. You shall speak in words of kindness and decency, and you shall honor God's creation. Now, as we come forward in the rabbinic literature, we see the evolution of this idea. Our rabbis teach us, "Aseh lecha rab uknei lecha chaver." One translation might be, find for yourself a rabbi, and you thereby find yourself a friend. And I truly hope that each of you feel this way with your rabbis, with your chazan, with your ritual director, that in your clergy team, you have friends. But I think there's an even deeper meaning to the statement, "Aseh lecha rab uknei lecha chaver." Find yourself a teacher, and you acquire a friend. Because the kind of people we want to surround ourselves are not people who agree with everything we say. The kind of people we ought to surround ourselves are not people who just go with the flow. And I have to even say the kind of people we surround ourselves ought not to just consume themselves with baseball or with football, with the Wolverines or with the Spartans. Don't get me started on the Buckeyes. The kind of people we are supposed to surround ourselves with are deep thinkers, learners, people who are going to challenge us to think on a higher level. People are going to ask us hard questions about who we are and what we believe. People who are going to make us think even more. Who are your people? Our rabbis teach. Your people should be others who think deeply about life and about the world, who are trying to make you a better person. And then the Talmud comes along and adds another layer. And the Talmuds present an interesting story. In Masechet Beitzah, they come to talk about a community in Babylonia and some new person comes into this community in Babylonia, and he's got a business idea. And he goes from person to shop around his business idea to try to get partners, to try to get other investors. And to each and every person he goes to, they turn him down. Okay, fine. They turn him down. Some business opportunities are good ones, some aren't. But then this same person goes to the same people, and he says, I'm hungry, I need food. And you know what they do? They turn him down again. And they turn him down again. And the conclusion that our rabbis teach is that the children of Abraham, the real children of Abraham, are those who show compassion for all of God's creatures. The real children of Abraham are those who show compassion for God's creatures. This week of Parashat Tazria, we come to see the importance of ritual, but only insofar as that ritual leads us to be better human beings. This week, we're reminded that the kind of friends we're supposed to surround ourselves with are those who make us deeper thinkers, who make us better people, who ask us to challenge ourselves beyond what we already know and assume. And this week of Parashat Tazria, we're reminded, what does God want? God wants compassionate human beings. The people we're supposed to surround ourselves are to be compassionate human beings. The kind of people we are to be to others are compassionate human beings. Because only in that way can we truly be those who bring korban, those who seek to get closer to God. Only in that way can we truly fulfill the mitzvah, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. This week of Parashat Tazria, I invite you to ask the question, who are your people? And even more importantly, I ask you to ask the question, what kind of person are you to them? Shabbat Shalom.